Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into an explainer that completely blurs the lines between astrophysics, science fiction, and, believe it or not, profound spirituality. We're going to be unpacking a highly unusual premise, a text that makes an absolutely wild claim about one of the most famous scientific minds in human history. I really want you to hold this question in your mind as we go through this. What if the sheer brilliance we all observed in Dr. Stephen Hawking wasn't entirely human? What if, and this is exactly what the text we're analyzing today claims, his immense intellect was actually that of an extraterrestrial scout planted right here on Earth to prep for a devastating planetary invasion slated for the year 2037? It's a massive, literally paradigm-shifting claim, and we're going to break down exactly how the author constructs this incredibly bizarre narrative. So, to wrap our heads around this, we have to look at our primary source material. We're looking at Ryuho Okawa's book, which dives deep into this alien threat theory. Now, the author doesn't approach this through, traditional investigative journalism. Instead, he uses a process he calls a spiritual reading. Basically, the book claims to tap directly into the subconscious, the very soul of Dr. Stephen Hawking. Today, we're just going to remain completely neutral, step back, and examine the fascinating ideas and the step-by-step claims presented in this text. Okay, moving into section 1, the space soul reading. Let's dive right into this. The author proposes a radical idea straight out of the gate, in the very first chapter. After conducting this remote spiritual viewing, the text claims Dr. Hawking's soul is not actually of earthly origin. Nope. Instead, he supposedly comes from an incredibly advanced alien civilization located in a star system called Centaurus Minor. And we're talking about a society with scientific technology that is leaps and bounds ahead of anything we have here on Earth. Which brings us to section 2, origins in Centaurus Minor. So during this spiritual interview, the entity is asked to describe its true physical form. And the response? It's pretty striking. It explicitly states it is not human. It says it stands upright with a broad chest, but its face is completely alien. It actually describes having, quote, big eyes like an insect or an owl. It specifically notes these eyes are vertical, kind of resembling the compound eyes of an insect made up of all these tiny cells of light. The text itself almost like a transcript of a really startling interrogation. Like when the interviewer asks if the soul has the features of an animal, it just bluntly replies, yeah, not human. This vivid, kind of unsettling imagery of vertical, glowing insect eyes is used to establish just how utterly alien this intelligence truly is to the reader. All right, let's look at section 3, the 2037 invasion plan. According to this spiritual reading, these beings from Centaurus Minor, they are not peaceful explorers. Not at all. They have a highly coordinated, massive invasion of Earth planned out, and the text zeroes in on a very specific timeline, the year 2037. The entity claims that leading up to this exact year, Earth is going to experience a whole bunch of conflicts, which the aliens will then use as a super convenient pretext to just swoop in and take control. And the attack strategy outlined in the text is designed to make human resistance mathematically impossible. First up, advanced electromagnetic pulses, or EMPs. These are meant to instantly disable all electrical systems, wiping out our global radar and nuclear defenses in literally a second. Second, the deployment of unknown, highly lethal viruses. And finally, and this is definitely the most chilling detail, the text claims a primary motive for this whole invasion is to actually harvest humanity as a food source. The author really methodically breaks down this inescapable threat. The entity coldly explains that our earthly nuclear weapons are totally useless, because the aliens will simply destroy our electrical command systems first, causing jets to just plummet right out of the sky. Plus, they plan to preemptively strike using biological warfare. Since these aliens are supposedly vulnerable to earthly pathogens, they plan to infect humans with a lethal virus first, essentially treating humanity as a contaminated food source that needs to be culled. Now, section 4. Infiltration and ideology. The text then introduces a specific faction that is supposedly already operating here on Earth, the mantis-type alien, which is described as a subspecies of reptilian. According to the reading, these entities aren't just hiding in the shadows. They are literally swapping bodies with human souls. They're operating inside human vessels to conduct covert espionage right under our noses. So the really crucial point here is that humanity is facing a two-front war in this narrative. You've got the physical threat, those mantis-type aliens physically infiltrating society, and that impending military strike in 2037. But equally dangerous is the ideological threat. The text claims these aliens are actively working to spread materialism and atheism all across the globe. Why? Well, because if they can strip humanity of its spiritual pillars, they destroy our mental and emotional resolve, and that makes the physical takeover incredibly easy. Which leads us to Section 5, the fatal weakness. Against weapons that can disable nuclear codes and viruses that can wipe out entire populations, the author proposes one ultimate countermeasure: faith. The book asserts that strong spiritual belief in the divine acts as an actual, well, literally an impenetrable shield. The aliens, who are fundamentally rooted in materialism, simply cannot comprehend or penetrate a truly faithful mind. It's a total blind spot for them. And this really builds the core underlying message of the book. The narrative puts forward the idea that earthly science absolutely cannot defeat extraterrestrial science. The technological gap is just way too wide. Therefore, the only way to block the invasion and basically render their physical and psychological attacks completely useless is through the power of profound spiritual faith. People who possess this strong faith are, according to the text, essentially invisible and untouchable to the invaders. Which brings us to the ultimate question posed by this deeply unconventional explainer. In a hypothetical battle against overwhelming, highly advanced extraterrestrial technology, could humanity's greatest weapon actually be its faith? Ryuho Okawa's book uses the figure of Dr. Stephen Hawking to draw a massive contrast between the limits of material science and the boundless protective power of human spirituality. It is a really fascinating genre-bending narrative that gives us a whole lot to think about regarding where our true strengths might actually lie. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving right into a seriously fascinating cosmological worldview from our source text. We're specifically zeroing in on Chapter 2, the Earth Defense Theory, as told by the Supreme Commander of Andromeda. Whether you're a longtime follower of cosmology or just dipping your toes into spiritual literature, this text maps out a hypothetical galactic conflict in a really unique way. So let's unpack this intricate material and take a visual journey through exactly what's being argued here. To help us navigate this massive extraterrestrial map, we'll break it down into 5 core areas: the arrival of Andromeda's commander, space demons and materialism, distinguishing good from evil, Earth defense and faith, and finally, a leader's heart and justice. Let's get into it. Section 1. Arrival of Andromeda's commander, the spiritual guide. Okay, so let's start with the central figure of this chapter. The intelligence providing this entire framework identifies himself as Kandahar, the supreme commander of the Andromeda galaxy. Now, what makes this premise absolutely wild is the claim that this entity is actually the guiding spirit behind the late renowned astrophysicist, Dr. Stephen Hawking. This channeled communication is basically framed as a way to peek behind the curtain of modern science and see the actual cosmic forces at play. So why is he here? Well, the text says Kandahar appeared specifically to push back against the growing influence of materialistic science. You know, the worldview that completely denies the existence of a spiritual realm. The core argument here is that there's a massive battle of ideas happening right now on Earth. And this commander has arrived to course-correct humanity's hyper-focus on the physical universe, which he argues is happening at the absolute expense of our spiritual reality. Moving on to Section 2, Space Demons and Materialism, the Cosmic Threat. So, what exactly is the big threat to humanity in this scenario? The timeline they introduce is actually pretty fascinating. The text outlines a situation where hostile extraterrestrial forces are actively spreading panic about a massive alien invasion set for around the year 2037. But here's the kicker. The commander explains that this rumor is a psychological tactic. The hostile entities aren't just aiming for physical conquest. Their real goal is to weaken human resolve and manipulate our societies through sheer panic and absolute fear. To pull off this destabilization, they use what's described as a creeping threat. The commander provocatively argues that extreme scientific practices, he specifically points to things like cloning and genetic manipulation, when they're used with the direct intent to prove that God is dead, are essentially tools of destruction. The source text literally dubs those pushing this purely materialistic, faith-destroying agenda as modern demons cloaked in science. Building on that, Kandahar asserts that this extreme, faith-mocking science isn't just some random cultural shift. No, he links it directly to a cosmic evil god, basically a Lucifer-like entity operating in the shadows. This dark force is said to use the shiny guise of scientific advancement to deliberately sever humanity's connection to the divine. And by doing that, they make Earth way more vulnerable to cosmic manipulation. Which brings us to Section 3, Distinguishing Good from Evil, the Galactic Binary. In a universe this vast, with so many competing agendas, how do we actually tell the good guys from the bad guys? The text presents a very clear binary. On the good side, we have cooperative extraterrestrials. They explicitly name beings from Vega and the Pleiades who operate entirely on principles of love, harmony, and compassion. On the flip side, the evil forces are defined by their reliance on fear. They use terror as their main control mechanism, mostly because this intense desire to dominate through fear is actually seen as a fundamental weakness. To help us figure this out, Kandahar gives us a specific checklist for evaluating any cosmic entities we might bump into. And the ultimate litmus test, it's not about how cool or advanced their technology is. Instead, we have to ask, do other harmony-loving beings agree with them? Do they possess spiritual faith and acknowledge a divine creator? And, absolutely crucially, do they value the contents of the heart over just raw physical or intellectual power? Basically, faith is the ultimate metric of a benevolent alien. All right, Section 4, Earth's Defense and Faith, the ultimate shield. So, staring down these massive cosmic threats, how is Earth supposed to defend itself? If you're picturing a massive buildup of sci-fi laser weapons, this framework completely flips the script. The text argues that humanity's primary defense mechanism is actually an impenetrable shield of spiritual unity and faith. The commander claims that a society totally convinced that this material world is all there is will just surrender out of self-preservation. But a society deeply rooted in the belief of eternal life and spiritual truth, they're going to fiercely defend their righteousness. The commander then introduces this wild concept called the reverse universe. That's the realm harboring these invading dark forces. But he strongly urges humanity not to be intimidated by it at all. The core idea here is that the divine creative power of the primary universe is absolute. Sure, the darkness might look technologically terrifying, but structurally, it just cannot overpower the fundamental light of creation. We're explicitly instructed not to overestimate this threat. So how does this translate into a real-world game plan? The actual Earth defense strategy laid out here rests on three main pillars. First, humanity has to cultivate a strong, unified, spiritually charged desire to repel hostile forces. Second, we have to actively cooperate and align ourselves with those friendly, harmony-loving aliens we talked about. And third, we need a firm collective psychological refusal to become a colonized sacrifice. This spiritual solidarity is what forms that impenetrable barrier. And finally, Section 5, a leader's heart and justice, defining righteousness. This really brings us to the philosophical climax of the commander's whole message about galactic politics, morality, and how we govern ourselves. In a complex universe where military interventions can look virtually identical from the outside, how do we accurately judge what's righteous and what's evil? It's a huge question, and it makes it clear that just looking at the physical actions of a planet isn't nearly enough to determine true cosmic justice. The text concludes that true justice can't be figured out just by spectating a conflict. Instead, we have to look deeper. We need to deeply examine the heart, the intent, and the true motivations of the leaders involved. Are they stepping in out of a desire for ego and conquest, or are they acting to protect and uplift others? The cosmic standard for justice is completely tied to the internal spiritual condition of the people holding the reins of power. Ultimately, according to Kandahar, true cosmic justice boils down to one absolutely vital characteristic: compassion for the powerless. Think about it. When a leader or a whole civilization reaches godlike levels of scientific power, do they step on the weak like ants? Or do they maintain a deep, unwavering empathy for the marginalized? A society that throws away its compassion just to achieve scientific dominance has, by this definition, lost its cosmic righteousness. And that brings us to the final, critical question posed by this Earth defense theory. In our incredibly fast-paced pursuit of scientific and technological advancement, have we actually taken the time to cultivate the spiritual wisdom and unity we need to protect our world? Maybe, just maybe, the real battleground isn't out there in deep space, but right here, within the human heart. What do you think?